Hey guys, BuzzFeed put out an article, 22 messages from creationists to people who believe in evolution. It was put out by Matt Stoppera, and what he did is he just went and asked creationists at the recent Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate what questions they had for people that believe in evolution, which I happen to correspond to that. Some of them were directed at Bill Nye. This first guy here says, Bill Nye, are you influencing the minds of children in a positive way? Now, obviously, this is not a question for me specifically, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it anyways. Heck, yes, he is. I got a master's in chemistry. A big part of that was that I thought science was cool because of Bill Nye. He had a great children's show when I was growing up, and it was all about how awesome science is. And I think it's important to actually note that the core value of both, I feel like, the foundation of America, like the actual founding of America, and science, is to question what people say, particularly those in authority. And science is essentially a way of just questioning everything. I've heard knowledgeable people describe the scientific method as, and I would agree with this, I've got a master's in chemistry, hell, I can say what I think about the scientific method. Never fooling yourself. Doing whatever you need to do to never fool yourself is the core of the scientific method. So if you have something that you think you believe is true, the scientific method dictates that you must come up with a way to test it. And only then can you say, I believe this. And that's something that I think is fantastic. It's a wonderful thing to do because it just absolutely explodes your critical thinking skills and suddenly makes you a much more interesting person in almost all walks of life. If instead of saying, oh, I thought this about this book, you can say, I thought this about this book, and here's these million reasons why, or this movie, or whatever. This lady asks, are you scared of a divine creator? No, I'm not. This dude says, is it completely illogical that the Earth was created mature, i.e. trees created with rings, Adam created as an adult? I would say yes. That is pretty much completely illogical, because what it does is it not just extrapolates to a time period we haven't seen, which is already dangerous. Even when you have a really good data set to go off, if you've got 3 lines that, here, I'll just draw this out. If you got 3 dots, I'm gonna find a basic bit. Alright, cool. If you got 3 dots, right? There's 3 dots, okay? And you want to say something about these 3 dots. You want to define a trend, right? So you put a line through it, right? This part in here, it's pretty reliable to say, these points in here are, probably on that line. But if you start, getting to the point where, you draw these arrows in, and you say, this happens forever. This happens forever now. This line is just going to keep going forever. That's, a super dangerous way to reason. Because you really don't have data about anything other than those 3 points. And now you're going to go ahead and say, all this stuff happens where we haven't seen anything. And that's a dangerous principle. You're getting outside of your body of evidence, right? So I would say, yes, it is completely illogical that the Earth was created mature, because now you're not just extrapolating, you're not just, talking about a time period you have little direct data about, but you're also saying that things completely different from the scope of our experience happened then. Things different from what the evidence has shown us happened then. So in our current time, nothing is created mature. Everything is created in its infancy in life. I'm guessing we're talking about life here. Saplings grow into trees and they have rings because each year they go through a process, and that's what creates the rings. I'm pretty sure that's different bark growing in to make the tree bigger, right? So saying the trees were created with rings, we're extrapolating to a time we don't have evidence of, and doing so in a fairly illogical way. I would say that's a very illogical thing to think, yeah. This dude with that look on his face, he says, does not the second law of thermodynamics disprove evolution? Second law of thermodynamics is that entropy always increases in a closed system. That second one's super important. Closed systems don't have any energy flow in or out of them, right? So this question is actually could be rephrased as, does not the second law of thermodynamics disprove computers? So a computer, you have a flow of electrons that go in that are unordered, and then they create things like pictures on your monitor that have just this outrageous level of order. Or an entire video game based on programmed code. Every rule in a video game is a line of code, and it all works flawlessly. So entropy is disorder. The disorder of a video game is so much lower than the disorder of those electrons that came into your computer, right? But the thing is that we're using energy to create that order. And that's something you can always do. You can take things, here, we'll do this, alright, right? Cool, alright. By this guy's logic, I just disproved the second law of thermodynamics, because I used energy to order things. These were separate, and now they are stacked upon each other all neatly, right? So, no, second law of thermodynamics totally does not disprove evolution. This lady says, how do you explain a sunset if there is no God? I'm gonna try and be as generous with this question as possible. I'm gonna say that's about the feeling you have when you look at a sunset. Of like, that is so beautiful. Certainly a feeling that I have as well. And to me that I'm experiencing awe of the universe. That's what I'm experiencing when I look at a sunset and I say that is so beautiful. I'm thinking the universe is so beautiful. God does not come into the equation for me at all there. So how do I explain that feeling? I explain that feeling by saying that I'm not a shell of a human being and I'm able to experience emotions. And that the universe is a beautiful place to be and we should all enjoy it. This dude playing a harmonica's smartphone says if the Big Bang Theory is true and taught as science along with evolution, why do the laws of thermodynamics debunk said theories? They do not. Scientists, it turns out, know quite a lot about the laws of thermodynamics and totally account for them in making theories. I'm gonna go ahead and say I simply don't know what this question is referring to. I don't know of any way that the laws of thermodynamics contradict the Big Bang Theory. There are good questions to ask about the Big Bang Theory. There's still like gaps in science's knowledge, or gaps in the body of knowledge known as science, I guess. But thermodynamics do not debunk the Big Bang Theory. I don't know. I would need to ask that guy, what exactly do you mean? What about noetics? This lady asks. She looks rather kind. So noetics is the study of like consciousness. That's a really good question. What about noetics? I love that question actually. Because it's really like, it's something that science is kind of just now getting to the point where we can even start to comprehend what those questions mean in a scientific context. Like neuroscience is so new, and we're just now inventing technologies that allow us to look at like different electrical signatures in the brain associated with different subjective things in consciousness. It's a really cool time for what this lady is calling noetics. There's also another like super not sciencey thing called noetics, which is more so about like not the universe affecting consciousness, but the other way around. How does consciousness affect the universe? At which like, and I just read the Wikipedia about this. I'm not gonna try and like pretend I know a ton about what noetics is or even that I'm pronouncing it right, but that's something that like shows up in poorly run scientific studies where kind of the experiment is less smart than the people being tested, and there's little holes where bias can slip through, I guess is what I would say. That's where a lot of the studies showing that like consciousness has a direct effect on the universe itself come from. Is just not very carefully designed experiments. Sorry scientists. We're not perfect. Sometimes people's biases can get through. So I would say that like noetics as a study of the consciousness affecting the universe is probably bunk. That's probably woo, probably not real. This guy asks, where do you derive objective meaning in life? I would say that meaning is subjective. Yeah. So, like, the objective side of existence is about, like, objects, right? And what they do and how they do it, right? And that's sort of the purview of science. And then, so he's actually asking a pretty intelligent question here. It's sort of similar to the is-ought gap in philosophy. So from any statement of, like, I have headphones, or, the Big Bang is how the universe was created, right? Any statement like that, you can't get from that logically to ought, to saying somebody should do something, or really talking about why. You can answer how, like you can ask why is the sky blue, right? But what you're actually asking is how did the sky become blue? That's actually like the scientific question there. Whereas if you keep asking why, in more of a like talking about meaning sort of way, that's not something that you can ever answer rationally. And so I would say, like, I derive meaning in my life. I'd kind of kick that word objective out of there, because I mean there is a consciousness, right? And like I said, science is just on the cusp of being able to ask any questions about it at all whatsoever. And yeah, for some reason my consciousness does want there to be meaning in my life. So I kind of answer that by trying to do the best for humanity that I can. And that's sort of an evolutionary thing to do too, to do the best for humanity. Yeah, I want to see us do well, guys. I want to see us make it off this planet and go explore the galaxy one day. That's really what I want. And I think that we'll get there a lot faster and a lot easier, and everyone will be a lot happier if we're super nice to each other along the way as much as possible. So that's where I derive meaning in my life. Question 9. If God did not create everything, how did the first single-celled organism originate? By chance? Oh my god, that's such a good question! Abiogenesis is so hard. So abiogenesis, Genesis like the book of the Bible, bio is in biology, and then the letter A in the front, meaning like not, so it's not biological creation. So that's the moving from molecules to moving to something that can self-replicate itself. Oh, it's such a hard question. What we know is that you can throw stuff that we think looks like the early Earth's atmosphere into a flask and shock it, and we can get amino acids out of that, like in a flask in a human time frame. And amino acids are like some of the fundamental building blocks of life, but truth be told, like, we're not that close scientifically from answering the question of abiogenesis, of how life first started. So that's okay, but it's important for us to be like realistic about it. We just don't have a very good scientific answer. And the reason's kind of in the graph, right? Is like, where do we have dots on this line? Like, the first thing that could self-replicate itself, sorry about that, a little bit goofy wording, like that's maybe it's a single cell, maybe it was just a strand of RNA that could kind of grab amino acids or nucleic acids out of its environment and self-assemble another copy of itself, the same way that DNA replicates by those strands interacting. But the big problem here is, like, we have answers for questions that we could ask along the dot of human life, right? And this problem of extrapolating from that, like when we have fossils and stuff down here, we can answer questions about long, long ago because we have fairly direct data about it. But when you're dealing with a single cell, when you're dealing with a strand of RNA, you don't really have a fossil to help answer that question. So we run out of data, like, pretty far away from the first thing that we'd call life. And like, human existence, you know, if you're gonna draw that line, if it's like if you take up the whole postcard, right, you probably can't draw something small enough with a pencil to like indicate where human life is on there. It's probably like an atom. Probably not an atom, but it's very small relative to like when life first sprung up. So it's a super interesting question of how did life start. And one day One day I think we'll be able to answer it with science, because, man, if you look at the advance of technology, in our lifetimes even, we are really good at coming up with ways of answering things, but I don't know if that will be answered in the scope of our lifetimes. I hope it is, though. It's a really good question. Super exciting. This lady just snarkily says, I believe in the Big Bang Theory. God said it, and bang, it happened. Okay, alright. Why do evolutionists, secularists, humanists, non-God believing people reject the idea of there being a creator God, but embrace the concept of intelligent design from aliens or other extraterrestrial sources? You would have to ask them. I think that's a vast minority of evolutionists, secularists, humanists, and non-God believing people. I mean, I kind of love to sit there and just, like, BS with people about, like, oh yeah, man, if there were aliens, how could that fit into, like, every little question that we have? But I don't seriously believe any of that stuff. I just find that it's an interesting topic of conversation. But I'd never seriously espouse a belief that mankind was designed by extraterrestrials. There is recently kind of, not very related to this, but an idea called panspermia, which is, and this is not recent, this is actually a fairly old idea, but we're doing tests, like we're sending on the outside of a spacecraft organisms that have been found to be super resilient against like radiation and like the vacuum of space, and we're gonna see if they can actually, I think it's some weird space program. I don't want to get where it's headed wrong, but it's going somewhere far away, and we're going to monitor like how long do these actually stay alive for in the vacuum of space. And it all ties into this question of abiogenesis still had to happen somewhere. There had to be first life, but did it necessarily have to be on Earth? Or could some chunk of rock from some other body, perhaps Mars, that had life before us, not that we know Mars had life before us, but if it did, could a chunk of Mars have gotten blasted off and arrived on Earth and seeded life here? That's a cool question. And it seems kind of plausible. Not at all a 100% thing, but a really cool idea. This lady says, there is no in-between. The only one found has been Lucy, and there are only a few pieces of the hundreds necessary for an official proof. Sorry, I had a little trouble with her handwriting. It's very cute handwriting, but I just didn't read it very well. Lucy, so this is talking about the evolutionary missing link between humans and apes, but this is sort of a moving yardstick sort of thing where you can always point to like a gap between organisms and say, hey, shouldn't there be something there? Because it's a pretty subjective thing, right? How similar are we to a chimpanzee versus how similar are we to a Neanderthal? Hey, aren't Neanderthals the missing link? Maybe, but no, but now we have to have Lucy, so that's between us and Neanderthals, right? Or older Homo species, I guess, would be the cutoff there. Not trained as a biologist, full disclosure. So that's what I would say about that, is it's like, we have the evidence that we have, and you could always point to in between the dots and say, yeah, but you don't have evidence there. And the answer to that is always, yeah, more evidence would be nice, we should keep looking for it. That's pretty much all that I would say about that. I have no clue how well studied Lucy is, but I think it's actually fairly immaterial for this question, because again, I think that you could point to any one of the many, many different species that were positive exist, like between us and chimpanzees, or between us and the great apes that currently exist, and say, yeah, all of those are the missing link. They're not missing, we found them. But you could always say that there should be something between what we know about and what we don't. This lady asks with a big smile on her face, does metamorphosis help support evolution? I don't know enough about metamorphosis to answer this question. I do not, but I want to say that metamorphosis is freaking incredible and a marvel of biology. A caterpillar goes into a cocoon, essentially turns into like a jelly, and comes out a butterfly after like reassembling itself. It's an absolutely amazing process that I encourage everyone to learn more about. But I was passionate about making this video, and afterwards I think I might be passionate enough to go learn more about metamorphosis. It's a good question, and I don't really know the answer, but I do know that there is a preponderance of evidence supporting evolution. It is the fundamental theory of biology, and it is to biology what the idea of the atom is to chemistry. It's what makes everything else possible in biology. If you don't have an evolutionary explanation, you probably don't have an explanation at all in biology. So yeah, that's kind of like what, like, it's sort of the thread that ties everything together in biology and the fundamental theory of it. Like, I mean, we've seen things evolve in, like, fairly human timescales even, where a city springs up around a moth and it grows camouflage to blend in with the city better. So, like, there's small things like that pretty much anyone would have to admit happen, because we've seen them. And then people just kind of go, yeah, but we've never seen a species transform into another species, and the answer is, yeah, but it takes a long time. And that's why we haven't, like, directly seen it other than in the fossil record, which we totally have seen that. This guy asked, if evolution is a theory like creationism or the Bible, then why is evolution taught as fact? This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the word theory means in science. What the word theory means is the best explanation that we have that fits all the data that we have. So, every super strongly supported piece of knowledge in human existence is called a theory in that definition. And it's actually one that I've heard talk that of some people in the scientific community being like, maybe we shouldn't just shouldn't use theory like that anymore, because it seems to be confusing people. And this guy is one of the people confused by that. So yeah, like the theory of gravity is a theory, is the kind of the example to go to. And obviously we are held to the ground by gravity. The fact that gravity is a theory doesn't make it any less real. Because science, by definition, is a theory, not testable, observable, nor repeatable, why do you object to creationism or intelligent design being taught in school? I'm gonna go with science is the most tested theory in human history. Because science is the theory that if you want an answer to something, you should actually do tests to find out whether it's real or not. So, as I said earlier, it's doing everything possible not to fool yourself. It's essentially saying, if I think the sky is blue, I should go out and look at the sky and make sure, because right now the sky is actually pretty gray where I am. And so that would disprove the idea that the sky is blue now, or that the sky is always blue. The sky is not always blue, it turns out. And so the idea that testing things isn't a good way of creating information or determining the truth or falsity of a statement is super well tested and observed to be very repeatable. So science is testable, observable, and repeatable. In fact, science is kind of the body of everything that is testable, observable, and repeatable. That's its purview. This lady says, what mechanism has science discovered that evidences an increase of genetic information seen in any genetic mutation or evolutionary process? What mechanism has science discovered that evidences that displays an increase of genetic information seen in any genetic mutation or evolutionary process? That seems to be asking, how does evolution occur? What is the mechanism of evolution? Yeah? Well, okay. We've seen, like, mitosis happen. We've seen procreation happen in organisms, like creating a baby, right? And at points in that, you can have changes in genetic information caused by random mutations, which we've also seen happen. Usually it's cancer. Sometimes, though, it's advantageous. That's evolution. That's like all of evolution. So that's a mechanism of evolution, but that's phrased in a super confusing way. This fine lass says, what purpose do you think you are here for if you do not believe in salvation? I already talked about my version of meaning in the universe. Just do the best you can. It's all you can do. You're here. Does it really matter why you're here? No, just do the best you can. That's the best you can do. Why have we found only one Lucy when we have found more than one of everything else? I already answered this question. The missing link is always the newest piece of information, so just because Lucy is the data point closest to human beings right now doesn't mean that we won't find more Lucys, that we won't find data points closer to human beings, and beyond that, I think it's immaterial. We're only ever going to have so much data, and people that really don't want to believe something are always going to point to, oh yeah, but you don't have like a perfect line with an infinite number of points. So, yeah. Can you believe in the Big Bang without faith? Oh. So here's the story of the Big Bang, right? Scientists developed this idea of the Big Bang, and that's just an idea, right? Anyone can come up with an idea of anything, but what made it a scientifically relevant idea was that it made predictions, right? So it said, there should be this thing called the cosmic microwave background radiation, CMBR. It should have this certain signature to it of it should look, like a black body curve, but of something, I believe, super, super hot, and it should be everywhere. And that was kind of the testable thing about the Big Bang Theory. And the crazy thing is that scientists discovered that idea and the predictions that it made before the data existed. And then later, some astronomers were working on their telescope and they found essentially a humming signature in their data that they couldn't get rid of. They thought it might have been like pigeons pooping on their telescope at first, but they did everything they could possibly think of to get rid of anything that would be creating that humming signature in their data, and they weren't convinced it was real because it seemed to come from everywhere. They pointed their telescope anywhere and they always saw this signature when they were looking in this certain way with this certain telescope. And so they were actually hesitant to publish on that, but they removed everything that they could from it, and eventually, sorry about that, camera cut out. Anyhow, they kept seeing the humming. Other telescopes eventually also saw the humming. It turns out the humming was real, and it turns out that it exactly matched the signature that theorists had said would be associated with the Big Bang. So that's how we know about the Big Bang, is because the cosmic microwave background radiation exists. It was predicted in the Big Bang Theory and then discovered. It's a pretty concrete thing, and there's still a lot of questions about exactly what happened in the moments following the Big Bang, and all of sorts of interesting stuff about the exact details of that theory. But you can believe in it without faith because there is data that support it. There are data that support it. Sorry, and that's what I would say. This woman says, how can you look at the world and not believe someone created or thought of it? It is amazing. Actually a fairly interesting thing, because while we can look at fictional worlds and say that they are amazing, I actually think the real world is far more amazing than any fictional world we know about. So, saying that someone created or thought of it kind of seems like an insult to the universe. I think all fictional realities are essentially based on the real world with modification, right? So I agree, the world is absolutely amazing, but I don't think that necessitates a creator, and you can learn so much more about the nuances that make the world as amazing as it is by looking at evidence and developing ideas about, hey, that's so cool, I wonder if it happened this way, and what can we do to find out if that's how it happened. And at that point, you're doing science, and it's a really cool thing to do. This guy says, relating to the Big Bang Theory, where'd the exploding star come from? Exploding stars are a supernova, good sir. The Big Bang is something completely different. Big Bang is an explosion of space from nothing. It's amazing. Big Bang Theory is super amazing. And there's no exploding star in it, though. If the question is, where did the Big Bang come from, right? Because that seems to be the question, to not just brush off the idea underneath this. the scientific answer is actually that the Big Bang is not just the start of space, an explosion of space into not even space, but it's also the first moment of time. It is t equals 0. It is a super amazing theory to learn about, and it's really complicated. Where did the Big Bang come from? And the answer is nothing. And isn't that weird? Don't you want to learn more? No, I guess this guy probably doesn't. I guess this guy probably he probably is looking to continue believing what he already believes and just look at that and say, no, I don't want to learn more. I think that's completely ridiculous. And there's people like that, but there's a cosmic microwave background radiation, and the only explanation for it is this sudden, huge outburst of energy in the distant past of the universe, and I find that intriguing. I find that an intriguing aspect of our universe, and it makes me want to learn more. So that's my answer to that. Is where'd the Big Bang come from? I don't know. I've heard it said that it's a meaningless question, that there is no before the Big Bang, and therefore it can't have come from anywhere. And that's incredibly interesting to me. This last fine gentleman says, if we come from monkeys, then why are they still monkeys? Why are there still monkeys? Why are there still monkeys? Why are there still monkeys? Because there is a niche for monkeys. Because monkeys fill a niche in evolutionary history that still exists. It still turns out that if you're like living in treetops in the jungle, having prehensile tails and like good agility and a high level of intelligence relative to other non-human animals is really useful. And that's why there's still monkeys, is because there's monkeys are still able to procreate very well in the world. That's why there's still monkeys. It turns out that there also were like monkeys that got more and more intelligent over time and happened to get more and more human-like over time, and that was also evolutionarily successful, but that kind of didn't make monkeys any less evolutionarily successful. That is the answer to that question. I hope that some of you enjoyed this video. I had a good time making it. There you go, 22 answers to 22 questions from Creationists. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, tell a friend, please, and see you guys next time.